Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. It's me, Ashley, here with Archetype, sponsored by Lenovo and AMD. Hope you guys are having a good day. Um, so even though I don't know what happened, but we have one more month or one more week of this month. I guess it's just, the way the Tuesdays fall. But this is going to be our last session of this mentor character, so we're hoping to wrap this up. So I'll be sculpting some cloth and getting the hair finished and fixing all the poly paint. Also be posing his face and stuff and get that pipe in there. I also recentered his weapon that he's holding, so we can finish that off too and go from there. So let's get into it. If you're watching, say hello in the chat. I always like seeing friendly little messages. Hi Angel and hi Tattoon from YouTube, and just YouTube right now. I don't see any Twitch people, but all good. So yeah, we've got a couple other things to add for this dude. I think I want to add another kind of like fancy belt thing with some straps and stuff, so we can get into that as well. So I'm going to actually just take this before I finish this and duplicate this and get rid of that, because I want something kind of ceremonial-ish. Actually, I think I want just that one. Kind of want it close to the edge there. And then we can extrude this one up. Oops, let me grab, there we go. That's what I want. Something like that, and then we can always crease it in order to get those nice edges. Now, something I like to do as well is if the topology is following, the big one along with the small, we can just merge them down before we subdivide it, and then those folds, we can sculpt them simultaneously. We can always split it off later, or we can stretch stuff later and do whatever if we need to, but it's a lot easier just to merge these two down. And now we have this, and now we can sculpt across them, and I can always auto group it later and color this differently and do a bunch of stuff, but it'll be easier right now to subdivide this. And start sculpting on it. Because now we can sculpt across all forms. Hello, Jose. Hello, Kente, I think. Sorry if I'm really bad at pronouncing those names. I think I want to exaggerate more of this overlap into the belt. So in order to do that, we can always carve this in so there's a big feeling of overlap or a sense of squashing, but we can also drag this down a bit more so it really feels like it's overlapping onto this. When it comes to like sculpting cloth, it's always kind of about adding more volume than you think to really exaggerate, what you're trying to say with the folds and what's happening with the creasing and stuff like that. And also knowing, if something like this is pinching or folding, how does that make the rest of the cloth react, right? So it's important to keep in mind how this stuff, if there's a lot of pinching and stretching that's kind of happening down here, then that means, there's not going to be as much folds and stuff up at the top. There's just going to be a lot of pulling from those points of tension. Yeah, so Tattoon's asking about how do I assume the wrinkles in the cloth, and it's kind of what I was just mentioning, where it's all about thinking about points of tension, you know, and where's this going to be, you know, something that's soft, or you also want to think about the material itself. So, for example, um, this cloth here, maybe it's not super rigid. So if that's the case, that means that wherever his shoulder is, and you can even, you know, throw on transparency and see where his shoulder is, that means that there's probably going to be a point of tension here, and then it's going to kind of fall off, right? So we could even do something like this where we know that, and I'm kind of exaggerating it for silhouette's sake, I'm not going to match it up exactly, but we can make sure that that falls off, right, into the shoulder, and maybe it lays down a bit more. I picture this being a little bit more of a stiffer material, but we can always exaggerate that a little bit, right? And then we can sculpt that point of tension by either giving it kind of like a sharp fall off here, especially for stylized stuff. We can kind of exaggerate that there's something sharp that it's hitting. And then if your point of tension is somewhere like in that area, then that means that the folds will fall off from that point of tension, meaning the very top of your shoulder. So we can kind of add something like that. Less is always more in the sense of adding folds. You know, you don't need a whole lot to say a lot. You just need that little bit to get the point across, and that will always help you too. And then what I can do here as well is add some little section line that goes along. I can mask that. Now I have that. I can invert that, hide that selection, and then I can use just the clay buildup brush, or you could use like the standard brush, like the Damien standard brush, to push that in. You can also just use the move brush if you want to. It's really whatever works for you. The point is that it's masked, so it's really easy to manipulate and to pull down. An easy way to create a seam line. So I can just go through here and add that. Someone is asking, hi Sin. Someone is asking on YouTube, do you prefer making textures like skin, wood, leather in the mesh inside ZBrush, or after the baking process in Substance? I love texturing and sculpting all of that in ZBrush, but it's not practical to do so in a pipeline. So I think the biggest thing, I'm gonna make this feel a little thinner. Probably just can pinch it. So with that, for games or for anything that, you know, you're going to be going into the render and texturing and stuff, it's a lot easier to just wait until you're in something like Substance Painter to do that. Just because, one, you don't have to worry about adding so many polygons to your ZBrush scene. You know, to get the detail that you need for something like a wood grain or something like that, it's just going to be so many polygons, you know. So I think overall it actually just becomes really impractical to do it that way, especially with something where you're just going to be baking it at the end. If you're just going to be baking it, then your resolution is your texture, and it's not really about the resolution of the polygons you can get. So because of that, it's just way easier to do it in texturing. Same thing with skin. I mean, I do big forms of stuff in skin texture. You know, it kind of depends on what you're sculpting. You know, like a female face, for example, is really fine to sculpt. So all that texture work might just happen in texturing and not actually in the sculpt. There's way more control as well when you're talking about doing something like tileable, like pore textures and stuff. Because if you try to do that on the sculpt, you know, you run into having to worry about pores overlapping and things like that, because our pores don't overlap in our real skin. And so you need to make sure that if you're going to be adding pores to your model in ZBrush, then you got to get something that makes sure that, you know, you don't have like a pore brush that you're just scattering everywhere, because that's not actually accurate to how reality works. So, you know, it's stuff like that that is a lot more difficult to think about when dealing with it in ZBrush. And it's a lot easier just to apply it and mask it off in something like Substance. So it's more fun to sculpt it, but it's way less efficient when it comes to actual like game pipelines. So for projects like this, sculpt to your heart's content, you know, but in reality, you probably won't be doing that stuff. Wrinkles differ in different types of fibers with their thickness. Can you please enlighten on that? Sure. So, you know, if you want to think about something like silk is something that's super, super fine and has like really, really, it's called weft and wafting, I believe. And it's basically the tension between the threads that go horizontal and the threads that go vertically. And that creates either something that's a super stiff fabric or something that creates a really, really, bendable and movable fabric, right? So it's really about looking at something like leather, right? Something like leather is super stiff and kind of holds its structural integrity even when it's like folded or something like that. So it's a lot harder to crinkle something like leather, right? Over time, as it ages, that's why you get those wears and tears, is because it kind of tends to fold at the same places, because over time, that's the part that gets the most worn. But in the beginning, like if you've ever bought a leather jacket, why is this not working? Is it flipped? I have a feeling it's flipped. Yeah, if you've ever bought like a leather jacket, like brand new leather jacket, they're not fun to wear because they're super, super stiff at first. So you have to like break them in and wear them in. And some people, like the really fancy leather jackets, they actually come like pre-worn. There's like a professional way to wear them and stuff. It gets really crazy with like proper expensive leather and stuff, and how you take care of it and how you get it to mold to you. Some people actually will wear the leather and then like soak it in a bathtub to like shrink it to your size and do all this crazy stuff with it, because it's such a stiff material. Versus something like a silken scarf or something, right? Like that's almost has no structure to it, and it kind of just falls over whatever it lands on, right? So those produce very different folds and very different wrinkles. One's a lot finer wrinkles, whereas one's a lot stiffer. And so, you know, the biggest thing is just using reference, just looking at reference and seeing, you know, what kinds of materials, you know, you're dealing with. Something like elastic, like you say, elastic doesn't fold. It has very tiny wrinkles, but that's because usually it's a very tight material. So it kind of squeezes anything that's attached to. But in our case, if we look at like, you know, these folds in the monk, like they're pretty thick folds because it's a pretty thick fabric, you know, and it's pretty stiff fabric. You know, you can see it's like doubly sewn over, and he's wearing something underneath something else, right? So that's going to make it even harder for this to move, but it's very stiff. So there's not that many folds that are going on, you know, and something like that. There's a lot of wrinkling here. That's a little bit finer, right? But depending on how it's worn, how tightly it's worn, and then how stiff that material is, all that stuff changes. You know, this is a lot looser of a material. It's like very baggy and has lots of other different folds. Whereas this here, you can see is a lot stiffer. This is what I was talking about with like the thing that we have, where you can see that it's so stiff that it doesn't just fall directly off his shoulder like the material that's underneath, right? It actually holds its structural integrity. Versus something like this that's like a lot more billowy. This is super stiff, right? This is like wearing a rug almost. Look at, there's only a few big folds that it can fold over, right? So versus something that he's wearing right here. So even just in this image alone, there's like a contrast between all the different types of folds that you get. You know, and even this here is much finer and all these little wrinkles. And I think that's what makes these images interesting when you look at them. So, you know, maybe that's something we can do here where something on him has a lot finer wrinkles, like maybe his pants are a lot finer than the rest of his outfit, right? The rest is much more stiff. And that's going to give some fabric and textural breakup to the final sculpt. So that's the type of stuff like in your reference that you want to pay attention to a lot, just so that way you get this idea of, you know, what are you making? Because in 3D, it's just a model, you know, it's just points and vertices, but how you make it feel like soft fabric versus stiff fabric versus anatomy and stuff is about how you treat it. And trying to find those structural shapes, you know, in your reference. There's going to be tons of bunching here, right? So we're going to have a lot of bunching that's going to splay out. Because all of this, even though the model is a thick thing to a thin thing, in reality, you would want to simulate all those polygons actually squishing up against one another. But, which I kind of have. But you want to make sure that you have all this topology that's... Did I do this again? I did. Flip it. There you go. If your brushes don't work, it's usually because you accidentally flipped your model. But I can bunch all this stuff up and exaggerate this, and then all that bunching goes away when it's finally able to fall down into its actual shape and structure. And same thing here. So there's a lot of bunching that would happen here. Right, and these 2 points are kind of competing with one another. And that's where you get sometimes some really interesting folds that happen in the middle of these things. If you look at like hanging curtains or something like that. Mr. Saito, good evening. Hello. I want to pull this down even more and have this really overlap to feel like it's really hanging off of him. I think that's pretty fun. Just gives it a lot more character. You know, same thing here. This is a bunch of bunching that would be happening. And then ultimately it would stretch out, you know, into something a little smoother. Do the same thing on the back here. So the point of tension really is more over here than it is here, but you can exaggerate all this kind of falling and then pull that tension up. The more we can pinch this, the more it will feel like it's real cloth. So again, we can pull this down now a bit more to get that feeling like it's hanging and that rope is actually really holding it in place. So we pull all this down. And how loose you want it is really dependent on, you know, how much you want this to droop. It's going to sell the feeling that's really hanging from that shoulder up there, right? So that's the important part. And then we can pull all this stuff down and make it feel like it's sitting on the floor or whatever it may be. I'm not too worried about anything happening here. I'm going to maybe pull this out so it feels like it's a kind of like a separate piece. Which if later, if it is a separate piece, then it's kind of fun to give that even more overlap, right? And I picture it being attached up here or something with like some interesting rope, but it's going to be a different color. So it's like just this another layer of overlap that we're getting. Maybe thicken this up. It's got a little thin. Oh, Saito was saying I was practicing a little bit of drawing, and that there's nothing more humbling and frustrating to an artist to practice figure drawing. Yeah, definitely. I feel like you can always get humbled by just going back to the basics, you know? Those fundamentals are really what makes or breaks, you know, a lot of just work in general. Just reminding yourself about those fundamental ideas that we're trying to capture. Art doesn't have to be complicated. I think artists tend to make it more complicated. Not to say that it's not hard, but I think relying too heavily on, you know, maybe fancy tricks or trying to rely on tools or something like that is problematic, where it's really just about all those basic fundamentals that we talk about, that every, you know, professional or teacher, student learning, we all talk about these basic fundamentals of like design and shape and studying your world. I think that's looking pretty cool. I think I'm gonna bring this rope in a little more on the side here. And then I'm gonna push this in more. Again, just more feeling of overlap. If I was paying attention, I wouldn't really want that, but that's fine. I'm not a huge fan of hand drawing these seams, but you can if you want to, you know, if you're looking for something maybe a little bit more sculptural, that's totally fine. Gotta think about where that seam would end up when it's getting all folded and crazy. I usually like making this seam line more interesting, or to make it feel like it's more of a rigid structure or something like that. And then adding all the folds and stuff around that, because that's usually how the thickest part of the part that's going to give whatever you wear structural integrity is all about where the threads line up and about where stuff is overlapping. The more overlap of fabric, the stiffer the fabric becomes, right? So Nerd Dracula, that's an awesome name, from YouTube, says, "Hi Ashley, love your work. Thank you, appreciate it." And Kevin just saying, "Too true." I'm assuming you're just talking about my work. Just how cool I am. So awesome. All the time, right guys? Not really, but it's okay. Subdivide this guy. I'm not gonna bother with adding thickness to this. Thickness can always, it just adds, again, another layer, quite literally, of complexity. And so if you feel like you can just kind of bunch it away and not need it for a sculpture like this, then totally go for it. So I'm just going to keep it simpler and try to sculpt on this. Again, where'd my reference go? Pop. Bring this back up here. Kind of want to look at these finer folds for his knee. I also have the reference of the fisherman that I can kind of think about as well. Oh my goodness, I cannot get that corner. Keep spinning my model accidentally. There we go. So again, his point of tension is going to be that knee. So I want to make sure that there's stuff coming off that. There's going to be tons of bunching that happens within where that knee is overlapping, right? And we're just going to pretend that we have all that geometry. And maybe there's a bunch of bunching and material at the bottom of his leg. And again, with gravity, you would get more material. Drooping down, so you'd get more doing this kind of number than you would at the top, because it should be resting on his calf here. So you won't get that. You'll get some tension, but not that much at the top. Maybe really more coming from the droopiness of the baggy. We can exaggerate that by just pulling this down as well, making it really feel like it's hanging off of his calf here. And it's already pretty tight to his legs, so we'll keep that. Eternal mark of cool. Thank you. So nice. All I asked for. Again, lots of bunching up here. The pants would be super folded. Try to create some overlap. I'm feeling like there's a lot of material that's getting snugged up there. And again, this would be an area of rest because it's going to kind of be tight right there on his thigh. And then maybe all the droopiness would come from underneath. And that's just going to sell. All these folds. That's always really nice to have something that's very busy versus something, again, nice area of rest along with something really busy again. And then as we up in resolution, we can start to add even more little folds and maybe like tiny points of tension going across, right? Where they would be folds stretching and matching one another. I try to keep my folds really flowy, so they should feel like they're flowing from one to another, because the reason why a fold happens is because there's something that's pinching that fold's going to another point of tension. So the point of tension here would be, you know, where his butt is over here. So all these are going to flow up into where his knee is, which is the second point of tension. And then right here, the point of tension is really more of the tightness of the ankle here. So we have 1, 2, and then 3. So all that stuff is going to try to bunch around into that area, which is where you can start to try to get like more complex folds and find something that feels right. Saito says that he's sad. One thing that he's sad about is still hearing a lot when beginners disregard the fundamentals, thinking they are superior by focusing on their style. Yeah, disregarding the advices from their art teachers. I think a lot of people style's a really interesting term that I do think a lot of beginning artists fall into this kind of like dangerous pit. Because a lot of people think that finding a style is what makes you unique as an artist. You know, we want to find something that is like our voice, but every artist is you're already unique if you draw. Nobody will draw like you. Nobody thinks like you, because you're you. So that being said, congratulations, you have style because you're doing it. That's one thing that Sadi Shafati said once in a tutorial, and that made me really happy because it's very true. If you're doing it, whether you're even if you're trying to copy or kind of mimic styles that you like, you're still the one doing it, which means it's still your style. It's still how you interpret the world. So try not to worry too much about the style of something. Focus on like how you like to draw and what you like to draw, and your style comes out of that. Style comes when you're not thinking about it. Style just comes when you let go and you just let your artistry kind of be your voice for what you enjoy. I think that's super important. And then with what people think style is like getting really good at like a certain way of drawing, but really in reality, style comes from just really good fundamentals. So people ignoring the advice of getting fundamentals and trying to find their style are you're kind of fighting yourself if you do that, you know, because it's the only way you will find your style is about breaking those fundamentals and breaking what you know and trying something different. And if you don't know what to break, then you're not going to find it, you know? So I think that's super important. Nerd Dracula is asking, would I recommend making those wrinkles in a character that will be animated? No, because you'll animate this orangutan sitting down and all those clothes and stuff will get simulated. This is purely if it's just sculptural. You know, we're not going into an engine, we're not making a game. And if he was a game asset and you're baking down cloth folds, you wouldn't be baking down this because this is really exaggerated for a very specific pose. When you're baking down cloth for games, you're doing something a little bit more generic than something super specific like he's sitting down and crossing his legs or whatever it is. So yeah. And then someone was asking this like slash brush, so the super sharp brush that I'm using, it's just the Damien standard, but being pulled out. So I use this a lot for like these really fine, sharp little wrinkles, and I like it. I feel like I like the style that it gives, or the feeling that it gives to the wrinkles. There you go. And so if you're trying to find your style, just focus on studying, you know, but studying in a fun way. So what I like to do as an artist who, you know, does a lot of studies or, you know, figure drawing, for example, or something like that, it's important to have fun with the figure drawing or have fun with your studying, or else you're not going to continue doing it. Don't make studying boring. So what I mean by that is, you know, if you're studying hands, one thing that I like to do is if you're studying hands, turn the hands into a bird talon, you know, what happens. Turn, you know, feet into monster feet. You know, I turn stuff into like dinosaur stuff all the time, or, you know, take that figure drawing that you're looking at and turn it into a character. Or turn it into something else, you know. You can still study stuff without having to copy exactly. And I think that's where reference and understanding why we look at reference and why we use reference and why we study gets kind of put to the wayside. It's not about just learning how to draw the figure and anatomy, but how to take that and put it into your own work in your own way, you know. Studying an orangutan is important, but what's even more important is studying the shapes of orangutan and figuring out how can you push the shapes that are there, right? That's what's kind of missed. You can draw a really realistic orangutan, that's fine, but that doesn't really serve a purpose when it comes to like designing for games, or, you know, King Louis from the original Jungle Book is a very pushed orangutan. You know, it's an orangutan, but it's a Disney style of the way they express that character, right? I think they purposely make him he's really small in reality. He's actually almost as small as all the other apes that call him king. It's because I think he has like the little man complex, right? Like he wants to be a man, but he's like this tiny little fat orangutan with these like giant arms. And I think they play into that design shape because they're trying to tell that story with that character, right? Which is where the live action one kind of fails a little bit because he's huge, right? He's like this monstrosity of an orangutan. It's like, why would that character want to be a man, right? Like that doesn't really make any sense. He's super strong and powerful. I think the original design was very purposeful. So, I think it's more about looking at characters and breaking them down that way. You're trying to serve. That's what Archetype is about. Is like you're trying to tell a story visually. So how do you describe how a character is feeling or who they are through what they're wearing or their faces and their emotions or their body structure, and sometimes you can break that mold. Like it's funny to have like a really buff dude who's super afraid of spiders or something, or who's kind of like scared all the time, and doesn't know his own strength or something. Like there's those tropes too to play with, along with the vice versa of just having like a rock who's like super strong and awesome and whatever. So it's all about taking those fundamentals and knowing what they represent stereotypically, and then breaking the stereotype, I think, is where you get the most interesting characters. And there's just some artists that are really good at that. I think that's where you get, again, the most memorable characters that you probably like in all your games or watching film or, when you're absorbing media. So. I will most Fixie, I think is that how you say it? You'll most likely do better than any AI art model can right now for hands. Yeah. Well, AI, don't be too scared of it. Kevin is asking, can you say style comes from when you understand the fundamentals and can manipulate what you see? Asking to tell students. Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of style comes from understanding when to break rules, right? It's all about understanding what's there and how to manipulate that into something different and to tell that story. Because stylization is it almost always is the breaking of, the reality or the world that we see, like 90% of the time. Which is why, when people try to do hyper realism, when you look at it as a game, you're just like, oh, I don't really feel like a style, right? Because it just looks real. It's not an expression of a thing that's existing. It just kind of is the thing that's existing, which I personally am not a fan of. I just don't like that kind of art. But to each their own. So, yeah, I do think it's ultimately your style is about how you interpret the world, and the only way you can interpret the world properly first is to understand it and then learn like what you like to break about it, so I think that's feeling better. I'm trying to get this to it's not as hangy, right, as the other one. Like there's some tightness to it, but I'm not liking these. They feel like the same shape over and over again, so I'm trying to fix it. I think maybe just keeping one or two of those in there. Maybe a softer fall off would help. Adam doing tech. He's saying, Ashley, how are you? I'm good. Hi. Nice to see you. You're so excited. I have to be like, you're just excited to say hi. There's so many exclamation points. It's nice to see you. Thanks for joining. The more the merrier in these streams. There we go. I think we're getting there. I'm gonna keep adding some bunching going on over here. Try to focus a lot on those front folds a little bit because they are kind of a little bit more front and center than some of the other stuff. And I think we'll also vary up all the different colors as well. So don't worry too much about that as well. Because right now it's feeling very all one color because it kind of is. So we're gonna focus on, you know, breaking up these colors like a little bit more. Nothing too crazy, but just a little bit more. And you can't really see these folds, so I'm not going to focus too much on these, but ooh, June 1st, sign up for classes. Heck yeah, that's going to be fun. And all my students are hard at work doing their final, so I'm excited to see what they all come up with. It's always really fun to see the variety in work from students, because you just never know what students really, because the first few assignments that I give in the class are just kind of simple exercises, so I don't get to see what they're interested in. And then when they bring in the concepts that they want to do, or if they bring in their own concepts, I'm like, oh cool, they draw, or they do this, or they like this stuff, you know. So it's super fun for me to see, you know, what they like and how they want to grow and what they want to do. There's always like a lot of really cool variety in each class, so it's super fun to teach. I also highly recommend, if any of you get the opportunity to teach, do it, because one, I think, I don't know, I learned a lot at my school, and I always feel like I want to give back and teach, you know, the next generation of artists. Art is meant to be shared, and that includes your skills, that includes your knowledge. You know, these people that hide away and they're like, how do you do this thing, and they don't tell anybody. I feel like that's so detrimental to what art is really about. You know, like, share your secrets, share your tricks of the trade, you know. Because maybe one day someone will ask you, or you'll ask somebody else, like, hey, how do you do this thing? And wouldn't it suck if they didn't tell you? I just think about that all the time. Like, if all my favorite artists like didn't share their work, I would not be as far as I am today in my art journey. So I try to do the same thing. But also, I feel like sometimes I learn more as a teacher than the student. Like, you're always going to learn something about yourself, about your process, about what you like, and comparing it to how students learn. And you will become a better artist if you can explain your process. And it's a super helpful tool, actually. And I love teaching that way because I see students improve, but then I also see myself improve. And the circle goes round and round, and it's awesome. It's a really cool experience. So I always recommend, you know, if you do outreach to your schools, or, you know, if you have a little brother, teach them how to do stuff. Or, you know, I did a talk at my little brother's high school. It was supposed to be a parent, what do they call that? Like a parent job sharing thing. But my dad was like, his sister has a way cooler job. Can she do it instead? And so I went in there and, you know, showed them that, like, you can make monsters for video games, and this is how, and this is the stuff that I did. So just making people really aware that this stuff isn't like a pipe dream that's unachievable. I think it's super cool. So outreach is always really, really fun for me, and it's super rewarding as an artist to share my work with up and coming and inspiring artists, because they also inspire me. So I don't know how I got on that tangent, but that's a piece of advice. We were just talking about teaching. I don't teach online. I teach ZBrush at the school, so I teach intro to ZBrush. So I teach people who have kind of touched the program or barely touched it, and we go over some fun stuff. And their final is something similar to like what I stream here, where it's, you know, pick a character, pick an environment piece, and you know, finalize it and bring it to like a full kind of sculptural finish. It doesn't really matter if it's ready for games or anything like that. It's just about you know, the program and the art of sculpting in it in itself. Saito's asking, I'm going to teach draftsmanship. Do you have any advice for new teachers? Advice for new teachers. I think it's important to, you know, be confident in what you're teaching, but it's also okay to, if you don't know something, don't pretend like you do. Art is a journey. I am not going to pretend that I know every single button in ZBrush. Sometimes students ask me something and I'm like, you know what? I'm actually not sure because I don't really use it for this, this, and that. And then you can like research it later and give them an answer. Or, you know, some students are really good at finding those answers themselves, and then you learn something. And I think as long as you treat it as an organic relationship, you'll be just fine. But confidence in what you know, but also accepting that you don't know everything is really important, because they'll call you out on your crap. It's really easy to catch somebody who's talking about something that they don't know. You're not fooling anybody, so just don't do it. Be humble, you know, I think that's important. You're going to learn more from it than you think. So I think a lot of people walk away being like, I'm a teacher, so I obviously know better. And every student that I've run into, I've learned that that's just not really how that relationship works. It's a give and take every time. So I think that's super, super important. Be yourself. You know, I am unabashedly me all the time because I can't help it, I guess, or so I've been told. So the way I am as I talk to you guys is the way I talk in class. You know, I try not to be anything more or anything less. I'm still passionately talk about dinosaurs to the end of the earth. I will still talk about character design and fundamentals and stick to what I believe in as an artist. You don't have to like pretend to be some other teacher. You know, everybody teaches differently, so you just have to kind of find your methods. Another one that's difficult, it's not really advice, but you are going to have to learn how to explain the same thing in like multiple different ways, because students just learn differently. So it's important to, you know, not get frustrated if someone doesn't get it one way, but try to just explain it a different way. And that's what I mean by you'll learn a lot about what you know and how you can explain things. And you'll realize that you're smarter than you think. I think most of the time, at least that's what I kind of discovered. I was like, oh, I'm actually like kind of knowledgeable. Wow. Because I have stuff to share that I didn't think I did. You know, and being able to explain it in a lot of different ways is really important for students to learn. It's really helpful for them, you know. Especially in ZBrush, I'm super understanding that ZBrush is a really complicated and weird program to learn, because its UI is so different from anything else that they've probably ever touched up until that point. So I try to be really understanding that like this program is super foreign, and that's okay. It's going to take some time. You know, you're not going to get masterpieces out of it from the get-go. I know I didn't, you know, when I started. Took a long time to find, you know, a good workflow. So Adam says he's taking Intro to Maya first and then Intro to ZBrush. Intro to Maya, then hard surface modeling, then Intro to ZBrush. Yeah. Or Intro to Maya, So I think the way the program he's asking basically the order in which to learn things. You don't have to learn Maya in order to know ZBrush. I think it's important to know a 3D program that's a little less alien than something like a ZBrush interface. It's just more helpful for when you do want to do something like learn Blender, or learn, you know, I don't know, Cinema 4D or something. Or 3ds Max, you know, they all feel pretty similar. It's just like, okay, where's the button? ZBrush is the one that's like really weird because of its 2.5D history. So You just kind of got to take that with a grain of salt when you're learning ZBrush, that a lot of the knowledge that you have about ZBrush, you're not going to be able to transfer over to other programs because it just works really weird. But that being said, normally I think you do Intro to Maya, and then you take Hard Surface 2 in Maya and Intro to ZBrush in the same term. So I think you learn it at the same time. At least that's what I remember doing. They might have changed it by now. I have no idea. And then the next class you do I think you take another texturing course in Maya or something, and then you also take Jared's Krishovsky's creature class, which is another ZBrush class. So all right, I'm gonna do this other side of the fur, and then I'm gonna model the weapon because we gotta keep going, and then I got poly paint and texture. Still got some stuff to do. I'm just blending the top though. That's really all this is, and then I'm just adding some striations to break it up. So that way it looks like it's a little bit more of a one clump of hair that then is breaking up into a bunch of pieces of hair. So it has a bit more of an organic feel. And then once I poly paint it to be like the same colors, it should be pretty seamless. So this is just another method. And then you can take the standard, you can cut into here, cut out. That's really all I'm doing, just breaking up the surface a little bit more. I don't mind it being, still very blocky because that was the initial sculpt and plan and idea. So I'm not trying to make it look like realistic fur. I'm just trying to make it look slightly more organic than just a bunch of tubes, really. Cool. All right. I'm gonna model his weapon real fast. To make the students suffer when tasking to rotate the cube. Yeah. Rotate that cube. All right, so I'm gonna model the staff here. Take a break from our traditional sculpting and go ahead and go into some hard surfacing. For this, I think it'd be easier to use probably a cylinder. Let's scale this up. Add some more subdivisions onto it. Group by normals, and then what I can do is I just want this section, and then I can insert an edge loop here. And then I'm actually going to get rid of a decent amount of this. Need to insert one more. I need to get rid of the center entirely, and then I want to get rid of this and this. Yeah. Maybe a little less. Yeah, I'll keep it. Leave hidden, and then I'm going to go ahead and bridge. So just some super simple modeling here in weld. Insert another edge loop here. And then I'll bring this down. And then we'll do an inset. That equidistant always kills me. Legacy is always way better for some reason. And then we'll just stitch these together. Nerd Dracula is asking, have you ever had a moment where you didn't know which style you liked, where you can already develop your own permanent style? Yeah, so I think the biggest thing with that is, like, you know, you'll probably go online, you find a new artist, or, you know, you see a recent artist and you're like, oh man, I haven't seen their work in forever. It's so good. I want to draw more like that, right? And then you just get really caught up in like this vicious cycle of like, it's an okay cycle, you know, you get really excited about, you know, somebody's work and things like that, and that's all well and good, but it is important to not lose sight of you know, your own personal growth and things like that. And I think it's important also to try not to change a style or like be like, ooh, I want to draw like this now because of so and so. You know, it's great to be inspired by other artists, but you know, if you get caught too many times doing that, then you won't improve in any, you know, sort of style. So one thing that I always say I'm going to do and that I never do is I'm not really great at, I wouldn't say I'm like a really good painter. Like I don't render things a whole lot. I really focus more on like, I'm very heavy in line work, and I do a lot of more like stylized stuff where, you know, it's more like cell shading and stuff like that. So I don't focus super heavily on rendering, and it's something that I always feel like I should be doing, but I think it's just a stigma of me feeling like I need to be a better artist because I don't know how to do that super well. Or I feel like I don't. I probably am better than I think I am, but it's just one of those things that you're constantly going to be judging yourself based off of what others can do and what you can do. And I think art's your own little journey that you have to take. So I think it's just important to not compare what you're doing or how you're doing it with anything else except just you. But it's hard, you know. I know it's hard. Insert. Well, actually, no. I'm gonna. Whoa! Oops. Synth, technical question. Do you ever get this message? Some undo history entries will be auto-deleted in order to preserve system memory. Do you make any changes or preferences for this? No. So you're asking if there's a thing that pops up that's like, hey, I'm gonna get rid of all your history from here on out. And it is a data thing. It just can't store the cache. And that's usually, I don't get that happening too often. I get it happening a lot when if you're doing like tons of, you know, really heavy like topology stuff. But that's really the only time. And I try to be really efficient with the way I model. I mean, you guys see the way I, you know, try to model stuff. I try to keep it super low, and those are some of the reasons why. Come on, Edgley. Partial. I don't want the whole thing. It's doing it on one side. Let's see. Nope, get down here. You are so mean. Let's see if I can mask this and mask that and see if that helps. Sort of. Sort of. I really just want to slide that down, but it doesn't. I'm gonna try to mask. That's almost doing it, except for this little stupid vert down here, so I can just move it. Whatever. Don't tell anybody. So bright. There we go. Ooh, actually, before I do that, I need to... If I want to create, like, basically a little point... I mean, this is actually the easier way to do it, is insert an edge loop, and then I'm just going to delete that one, and then you get, like, a really fine line. And just delete one side of it, though. So now I have a thin thing. And then I'm going to... Well, we'll try 30. That worked. And then we'll grab this guy. Group that. Group that. So one thing that I will do too is I'm going to send this home so I get the center. So that's the center, but I want to, I'm going to pin this. I'm going to move this ever so slightly this way. And then what I'll do is a mirror and weld along the Y. Not along the Y, I lied. It's going to be along the Z. There we go. So now I have two sides, but it has a little bit more thickness to it. And I can unpin it, I can bring it back down here. Oops. Oh. Friendly reminder, save your work. You are my hero today. You're so nice. Thank you. I'm going to save right now. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Noki sign, thank you for saving. And Velasco, thank you guys for looking out for me. Appreciate it. Adam is asking, how can you decide between animation and character design? I'm debating between the two because I like them both. Yeah, that's a tough one. I love to animate on the side. It's something that I still try to get better at and do. But it is one of those things where it's like, yeah, you gotta pick a specialty. Designing and coming up with the stories of characters, it's always really satisfying to watch them move, 100%. But yeah, it is hard to pick because I love both a lot as well. I don't need this. Actually, but I think it is important to somewhat specialize into something. Otherwise, it's too difficult to. There's no job that'll, unless you do it like a really indie, studio. You're very unlikely to do character animating and modeling. So I think just getting really good at one or the other is important. But that doesn't mean that on your own free time you can't experiment and have fun with all the other tools. So yeah, I do think it's important to try to pick one though and go for it. And paint that stuff on a little later. I wonder what happens if I do that. I want to soften this edge a little bit, but I can probably soften it in the actual smoothing of like the crease levels instead of in the actual geometry. It looks a little smoother, and then normally I'd go crazy and be like, yeah, let's merge it all together, but I'm not going to do that because for time's sake. I'm just going to cut this and cut that. Oh my gosh, Ashley, draw a straight line. You got it. There we go. Just thicken this area up, and then we'll also give this, picking this out, and then I'm gonna bevel it a bunch to get a rounded thing. There we go. Oops. Actually, I can turn on symmetry on all. So is it on X and Y? Or is it on Z? It's going to be on Z. There we go. So now I can make this bigger and round this out and have it be more like a ball. Because I'm pulling from all four sides. It says Adam says he's working when he's really young, creating stuff always in the back of my head since I'm an adult and have income and all, trying to fulfill that childhood dream. Yeah, it's never too late to do anything. You know, I have a buddy who, you know, he's been drawing and always loved it, but he never really pursued it for real in a career. And then when he finally decided to, he now has a job as a concept artist at, I forgot the name of the studio. Shame on me. But yeah, now he has a job doing what he loves, you know, and it's super cool. I don't think it's ever too late to get into something like that, you know. I'm gonna do one thing and add those. We have some rings that I'm gonna hang some tassels on, so make a ring. But yeah, it's never too late to do that. But also, you know, if you just love doing it and you just have fun doing it, then just do it. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. Push down. Okay, so now we have that. If we want to add some like cool wraps and stuff to it, that's also pretty easy to do. Is I can take this area, I'm just gonna cut it up a bunch of times in interesting ways. Duplicate it. I can actually get rid of that now in my old one. Have this one. So this. Oops. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Hidden, and you can do go to edge loop and say group loops. I think. Panel loops, yeah. Go to panel loops. You don't need a lot. Make it a little thicker. Turn off polish. Just a really fast way to make it look like you made edge loops, but I want to try to get rid of the not the bevel. Panel loops? Yeah, there we go. It's a little better. This makes it look like there's good grip on it when there's not. Saito's asking, what artists inspire you the most? For me, Alex Ross. Alex Ross is awesome. Ian McCaig's a big one for me. Big fan of Ian McCaig. I love Rob Bliss. Rob Bliss is another favorite. Akira Toriyama is awesome. Achiro Oda, obviously. One Piece is amazing. For his character, if you want to talk about unique and weird and awesome character design, it is Oda. But that's a recently found artist love, because for too long, too many people told me not to watch that show because it was too long, and I'm very upset. It took me so long to watch that damn show. Let's see, who else? I do love, he's on my shelf actually, is Hiraki Samura. He does Blade of the Immortal, and his graphite drawings, his pencil drawings are so good. They're some of my favorites, so. I think I have a braid brush, so I'm gonna just grab that. Somewhere I have braids. I think they're really heavy. I always mean to remake them because I think they're too heavy. But for this, yeah, braid brush. Actually, they might not be. Yeah, that's fine. Whatever. Stroke. Pop this over, change the fall off to flip it. And in this case, I don't actually think I want really a lot of tapering because I want to end it in a tassel. Junji Ito's awesome. Ooh, Q Hayashida. Okay, I'm gonna look that up, definitely. Wayne Barlow. Wayne Barlow's another really good one. David Coleman's up there for me just because I met him at an anime expo. Was it? No, it was Animation Expo in Burbank when I was in high school, and I showed him my work, and he was super nice, and he gave me a lot of really cool advice, and he was one of like the first artists that I had like the courage to talk to and like show my portfolio into stuff to when I was, you know, in high school. And he was really cool about all of that, and so you know, shout out to David Coleman. I love his work. He does a lot of cool storyboarding stuff now. But yeah, that guy's awesome. And also he does a lot of cool animal art, which I'm a big fan of. Christine Bain is another really good one. Jock Hooper is another really good one. I'm gonna put a little cylinder here. Oops. There's so many. Oh, Raul Salomon, what's his name? Salomondo? So I forget his name, but man, his stuff he's definitely one of my favorites as well. Super good shapes and character design on that guy. He's huge. I don't want to turn it now that I have it set up this way. I kind of just like rotated it and it was fine. I'm actually going to turn it. I'm gonna make just one of these real quick, and then I'll just duplicate it again because I want to add got this blue over here. I'm tired of looking at this thing being gray. Got a little ball. This is like a little tassel thing at the very end of it. Oh, okay, now I can duplicate it. So this is asking if I'm gonna get the new Zelda. Not right now, probably not. I don't really feel like playing games at the moment, but I also just, I don't know, it's really hard for me to play. I'm not really interested in playing games where it's like all these, you know, I know you can be really customizable now in it with the tools, and my brain is just like, no, I just want like a story experience. I'm not really interested in doing that. So right now, no. Maybe later. Maybe if I see enough people being like, oh yeah, story is this and that. But the hook of just like building stuff, and I've seen so many people like setting fire to Koroks. I'm just like, I'm not really interested. I'm not really interested in that. But hey, have fun. Like, everybody do their own thing. I'm also just I feel like I'm just too busy to wrap myself into a game that takes, you know, hours and hours away from other things. So. Grabbing all these and starting to colorize it. Start focused. So focused trying to get this thing to a good spot. The last game I played really heavily was 80s, so I'm just not going to pick anything up for a little while. Not really sure yet, though. Add some details to this real quick. So delete hidden, and then I'm gonna bevel. Do this and this. Why wouldn't you do that? Just extruding this up and adding like some gold detail to it. This is kind of how you can also, like, it doesn't look like anything now, but this is how you can just start building on something that just feels like it has a little bit more detail. You just keep adding like small things here and there. And then the second one to the third one, go. Right. I'm also going to go in and go ahead and sculpt on his body and his face a little bit, but I'm going to start moving his mouth around separately from his... I'm wondering also if I should do this in T-Pose Master. I don't think I will. I don't think I need to move it that much, so I think I'll be okay. I'm just going to move his lips around a decent amount, though. That's all. Because I want one lip to... Again, I'm kind of trying to copy my drawing, so... One side of his mouth be kind of closed, and the other one kind of poking out. Kind of like he's talking from the side of his mouth, and then we're going to add the pipe. And I'm going to crush this side, add a bit more volume. You can also take this eyebrow, move this up, kind of give it a unique expression. Move his little mustache around, move his beard up a little bit to match his lips. And I'll probably warp his face a little bit so that way it feels a little asymmetrical. T-Pose Master, I plead ignorance. What is this mode? So T-Pose Master is where you can bring everything at once. It will merge it all down for you. If you look back on some of the way, like the way we posed previous characters, not this one, but previous characters, we use T-Pose Master to, basically it merges everything down to one, and then you can pose it all at once. And then send it back over and it'll repropagate your pose onto all your split up meshes. I do it a bunch of times in all the other streams, so you can check that out and see kind of how I do that. It's a really helpful tool. So yeah, definitely check that one out if you haven't seen that before. It's really only for, it's helpful for like making big adjustments to a lot of tools if you have stuff separated into a bunch of stuff. But it's also the main way to pose your models in ZBrush. You can use like a rig using Z-spheres. I find that it's just as much work as the other methods, so I just don't bother with it. Bottle of pipe now. Let's stick this out. And then something we can do here is rotate this around, and then I'm gonna should be able to delete these. So I'm going to delete this group and this group, and then you can say close convex hole, and then we can choose the resolution. Whoops. Oh no, it's bridge. Bridge 2 holes. There we go. One to the other. Give me my resolution. That's all I want. Then we can just slide these. This isn't super accurate, by the way, but it's fine. It's fine. Bevel that. Yeah, T-Pose Master Kevin is just in the Z plugin. Ooh, my shoulders. Spicy shoulders. It's super, super easy. It's just, it's one of those things where posing in ZBrush is all about getting those poly groups right when you're posing. And again, I show that as an example in the other videos, so you can watch that. Ooh, should we sculpt the smoke? We should. We should sculpt that smoke. Whoa, don't do that. Man, that gives so much character. Good old pipes doing things that are useful for me. That's fun. And then we'll definitely, I'm gonna duplicate it, and then I'm just gonna grab this hidden auto group. Whoops. Get rid of that dude. Don't need that. And then I'm going to extrude that. And I'm gonna dynamesh it. Use the snake hook. I'm gonna mask the bottom. I'll start to inflate in areas and oops, close holes. Now I can move it. Smooth that out. Auto group it, turn on groups. You can just move this around really crazily if you want to, or you can use some deformers if you wanted to. I think this should work just fine though. Again, the thing that's going to make this feel like dynamic smoke is, again, looking at it from all angles and making sure that it's like swirling or doing something interesting to give it like some dimension. You could make it like really billowy smoke if you wanted to. Fun. Nice back and forth. Again, making sure that it's from all angles. Smoke is feeling like it's really wrapping and doing a bunch of fun stuff. Just so that way from all angles it feels cool. I wants to see if I can add like a little swirling in it or something. Just to give it some more like style. It feels like plumey. That's fun. Sure. Sure. Why not? I think I want it split one more time. There we go. Before it merges back together. Like, do I want to split somewhere else? It's kind of fun when it does. I definitely like it down at the bottom. That's a lot of fun. Get back in there. There we go. Whoop. So that's why I masked it first, because I knew that that would be a pain. All right. Cool. It's coming together, guys. Grab this thing. Make it some other color. Let's see, we can maybe. That'd be fun. Ooh, we could also. I'm going to go to the lovely internets. Let's see if we can find like a floral pattern or something. Look up tileable. I know you guys can't see what I'm doing, but promise you I'm Googling and looking up tileable textures. Let's see if we can find something kind of interesting that also matches with our color scheme. That's kind of cool. Let's see. Open this image. It's got eye stock on it. That's okay. We won't be able to tell, right, guys? Shh, don't worry about it. Let's see if it works. Let's just see if it works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this guy. We can UV it all, but I think I'll probably just take this. And now that we have it sculpted, I'm going to split it off. So I can go down to the lowest and say split hidden. Oops. Cool, it did it, and that scared me, so now I'm gonna save. Okay. So now I have that, and then I have my low res, because I want to put just the texture on this guy. So I have this dude, so I'm gonna go to Z plugin here. I'm gonna go work on clone. Now I have this with no polygroups. All I want is the outside. I don't really care about the inside, but this should give me the flat polygroup here. So then I can go to polygroups and say unwrap, flatten this. There it is. It's super tiny for whatever dumb reason. It doesn't really matter on size, but I can size this up if I want to, because this is the only part that I kind of want to be correct. It's not going to be perfect because it's ZBrush, but I have that. I'm going to unflatten it, copy those UVs over, bring it up to here, paste it. And now what I can do is I can say texture map, and I can import that flower pattern. Whoa, it's really big. Oh, actually, instead of texture map, I can do it in noise, and I can keep the color. I should be able to keep the color flower, because I need to be able to tile it myself and say UV, change the scale, turn that mix noise off. There we go. Isn't that pretty? It says iStock on it, but it's okay. We can go ahead and adjust the colors so that way we can see our pattern. And say okay. And there you go. Now you got a nice little texture pattern. If it's upside down, you can, or at least this one feels upside down, we can go and edit it, and we can adjust the angle of this. Which one? I lied. Apparently you can't adjust the angle. Fine. So if it happens like that, we can say work on, we can go back to our work on clone, flatten it, and then take this. Oops. I'm gonna auto group. Take this piece and flip it around. And then say unflatten, copy UVs, go back, say paste. There you go. Now it's nice and following the better curvature. That's pretty cool. That's a nice little detail. Yay. I'm gonna make the pants darker than this. Also, I'm gonna add subdivisions to this, and it's just a surface noise, but I'm gonna actually apply it now. Let me check. Let's see. Wisdom comes from the weed, Gandalf the green. Heck yes. Silly random question. Do you ever use the ZBrush ability to give the interface transparency? I do, but I only used to use it to watch shows while working. What projects have you worked on that I really loved? You know, that's a really common question that I get asked a lot, and my answer to that is always, I don't really have one, because it's always about the collaborative. Like I just love working with a team of people. I'm gonna save this, by the way. Save. It's always just about working with like a team of people, and it's super fun to you know, work together to see something fulfilled is super cool. So it's not really about like, you know, working on Mandalorian or working on blah, 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 or whatever. It's really about just like coming together as a bunch of different people and working on something. Is super fun. And as you continue to be in the industry, it kind of is that, where it's just like the collaborative is what feels the best over anything else. So I've worked on a lot of cool projects, but it's definitely, I love working on maquettes. So, you know, like working on the alien maquettes were super fun just because I like sculpting. But that wasn't as collaborative as some of the other stuff that I've worked on, and it's super fun to, you know, build something and watch somebody take it and then turn it into like a cool animatronic or, you know, whatever it may be. So I think that process is really, really cool and super fun. Why did my smooth turn into a move? Just gotta reset. I have goosebumps in here. Where are they? I like this brush. This brush is cool. Add some goosebumps to his skin here. And probably to his face a little bit too. Synth is asking, what's the main reason for working on a clone as opposed to working on the original? So I have found that sometimes when you work and unwrap UVs, sometimes it will change the scale of your scene without telling you, which is not good. So working on clone will always make sure that the scale of your scene doesn't change. And it's really important when you're working on something like, you know, practical effects where it's all based on real world scale or on the miniature scale or something like that. So yeah, I just always make sure that I don't run into that issue. So I'm gonna hide this for a second because I need to grab like something that doesn't have subdivisions, but I'm going to draw laces on this thing here. There we go. I think that lined up well enough that I can split some nice points. Now I have that. I'm going to do yellow. It was all yellow. And then I want to grab, I just want the string. I don't really need there's like little shoelace holes that come with it that I don't really care about. So I'm going to delete those. And then I'm going to move this to kind of line up with the belt thing that we have here. I don't know, some sort of like cool ceremonial fancy thing. Fancy thing. That's the technical term. About just getting I always used to think this was really confusing, and it is, to like make sure that this feels like it's wrapping, but the secret is just making sure that the edges go under and over. You're always seeing all of the shoelace. A little time consuming, but it's worth it. We have time, so we're wrapping up here and adding our last little details, and I'll do some poly painting to blend some stuff, and I think we'll be calling it soon. So speaking of wrapping this one up, my idea for next archetypes is a pretty nerdy one, but I started a D&D campaign with some friends, and my goal is to sculpt all their characters and print them out. I got a little 3D printer, so been starting printing some stuff, so it'll be really fun. And so I thought it'd be fun to show you guys how I'm going to sculpt all those characters, and we can come up with their costumes and all that based on, you know, my friends' character designs, and well, not their designs, but their ideas for their characters, and go from there. And I think that'll be really fun. So the next few characters and stuff, I thought it'll be fun to basically base it off of the campaign that we're doing. So I'm going to start with my character first because it's the most obviously fleshed out, since it's my character, which is a druid type. So we're going to do our next archetype as a druid, and then we'll go through a bunch of fun little characters. So I thought that would be a fun way to kind of combine a bunch of cool characters together, and then I'm also going to print them, and I'll maybe hopefully be able to show you guys that stuff. So hopefully you're a nerd like me and will enjoy that process. I want to make this thicker. There we go. I'm gonna go into poly paint, and I'm gonna start. That's been bothering me for so long. It's just blending this thing. Go in here, I'm gonna pick, this poly paint and start blending this down. And I could pick a darker, even more, maybe more saturated. Wow, don't go crazy. If you want to get real fancy with it too, eventually you can. Oh, topological would actually work. That'd actually be kind of cool. So you could do topological. It might be a little laggy, but if you wanted to like brighten just some strips, you could pick color, make it brighter, and then you should be able to paint topologically. It's a little slow, but you can do it. Just to give some breakup to the inner ones. If it's a little too bright, you can go over, you can turn off topological later, and you can go back over it, but it gives it like a little bit of breakup. So now I can go and pick this one and kind of go over it again gently. So you can do something like that too. Get real fancy with it. Darken this area here. Just making sure all the colors that are, going around are matching. I think I want the top to be, a little bit more red, like a brighter red. Fun. And I can make this a little darker too. Make his eyes a little more dark inside. Kind of sink those in. Maybe give a little bit of a grizzly darkness around his lips and maybe down here. Just to give some color breakup. Maybe we can make actually the top his little lighter to kind of match with his beard here. Normally I probably would have added more hair, you know, going along. So it's like little pieces of fur as well. So he has like kind of, whoops. And this a little bit, and maybe have this. I don't know if this would be realistic, but it would have this like, feel like it's glowing. Which means this is like dirtier smoke, so it's darker. And then as it gets up, it gets lighter. Just to add some cool variation to the smoke. It's not you can get away with like the idea of something and just paint. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you guys. I added a little base just so you could be sitting on something kind of cool. It's very realistic because it's a mega scan or whatever, and there's some like weird blurring on the texture, but I thought it'd be fun to put it into something like that. And turn on perspective to oops, oh no. Don't want to move any of that without that stuff. So I guess I'll use Transpose Master one last time. So if I want to move this around, I'm going to turn this off for a second. Well, the easier way, I mean, I'd rather just merge it down right now because it's easier. I don't want to use Transpose Master, I'm sorry. There's too many other things that I'm like, nah. Okay, that's all one. See, that was way easier. Turn that all back on. Snap that there. Move that out of the ground. Something like that. And there's our mentor character. A lot of fun. This guy was a lot of fun to make. All the fur and stuff was it's always interesting to see how, you know, you can handle it different almost every time. I know I have in the past. So there you have it. The render always looks terrible in ZBrush, but let's see what happens. I'm trying to render out some shadows. But, so, like I said, this was, yeah, see, the shadows are always so terrible. They're just like too dark and not interesting. I'll have to render out, like I did my last character in Marmoset. I threw it in Marmoset and rendered it. But, there you have it. Our mentor character. So like I said, next week we'll probably be doing the druid. I have some drawings already of what I kind of have an idea of, but we can still go through it and maybe I'll figure out some new stuff with it. So we're going to be getting into the D&D-ness of things because I thought that would be a fun way to add to archetypes and characters. So join me next Tuesday for that stuff. Thanks for watching this stream. As always, I'm your host, Ashley, sponsored by Lenovo and AMD. This is Archetype. Super fun. I will catch you guys next week as we start a new character. So it'll be a good time. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Bye.